Good morning, everyone. Kate and Fiona Pearman joining you for this week's Facebook Live as we start to really dig into how do you process, seek out, integrate feedback in a way that is valuable for you and really leverages the opportunity that feedback has for your growth and potential. And today we want to talk about a tool that we call the feedback triangle. It really is a tool that allows you to seek out perspectives beyond your own and encourages you to suspend judgment and really leverage the opportunity, as I said, that's in front of you. I think the feedback triangle allows us to look at, I guess, a topic from three perspectives. So firstly, your own perspective, the self. Secondly, feedback from what we call trusted supporters. And then thirdly, feedback from detractors or people who might have a different perspective or perhaps a more critical perspective than your own or your supporters. And leveraging the feedback triangle is really valuable for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it helps broaden your perspective beyond your own often narrow view, which sometimes can be overly critical. Secondly, it really includes the perspectives of others. And so it can help us see some blind spots, but also see some of the strengths that sometimes we might minimize. And thirdly, it really can help us see the bigger picture to be able to decide what's most valuable beyond what can sometimes be a really narrow perspective that we can hold.
Yeah, I think the beauty of this tool is it really expands what's available to us in terms of making good decisions, reflecting on things, and thinking about what we want to do in the future. And we like to start with what's going on for you. So start with your own reflection, your own view of what happened, your performance. We know that there's a lot that goes on in our mind, and sometimes we can be quite self-critical. We can beat ourselves up. We can have very huge expectations, then things don't align, and we suddenly feel as though we've failed at something, and we can make all sort of meaning of that. So this is an important part of the journey, is actually pausing for a moment and just noticing what's going on for us. Perhaps our perception of what's happening is a bit biased. Perhaps it's influenced by things that have happened before. Perhaps we're just being really harsh on ourselves. So we want you to take a moment to listen and to reflect and to ask good questions, perhaps journal around what's happening for you so that you can start to break it down and potentially see some of the layers that are playing out for you. And this is a sort of a good self-check-in process. It's the first part. It's one perspective. We want to unpack that, and then we want to look at what else.
Yeah, I think here we want to encourage you to be your own best coach, so asking some good questions. It can also be helpful to give yourself some space and time. So that doesn't mean the self-reflection immediately after something is the most reliable, valuable. Sometimes it can be helpful to sleep on it, just to balance out some of those, particularly if things didn't go so well. It can be useful to sleep on it just to balance out some of those the negative self-talk that we have. But your inner narrative, your inner self is often your first filter. And so it can be empowering, but it also can sometimes be biased. And as I said earlier, it can sometimes be heavily focused on what didn't go so well, and we can miss what went well. So taking the opportunity to really explore, unpack everything that sits within that data point, then we want you to go and seek out some feedback from some supporters. So in the context of maybe if you were presenting during a presentation, you'd sit down and you'd do your own process, and then you'd go to trusted supporters who are in the room and ask for their feedback, their perspective. And this is really useful. Be a little bit careful about going too much to a raving fan, because here from our supporters, you want to, of course, hear what went well. And sometimes that can be really useful, because particularly if we're in a dynamic which didn't go so well, we can completely discount or be oblivious to what did go well, and we can orientate too heavily to the negative. And so part of what we're seeking to do here is really balance your perspective, but being able to, again, ask good questions. What went well? What could you do differently? We're wanting to leverage the opportunity to get ideas of how we could do these things differently if we were presented with the opportunity again. But this can be really valuable in terms of really broadening and balancing the picture. And also, as I said, helping us to identify some of the things that maybe we do naturally that we either are oblivious or unconscious to, or completely discount it because we just think everyone does that.
What we know is that many women are underplaying to their strengths. So they're not necessarily conscious. They're not necessarily aware of the things that went well. And because of our tendency, our bias to focus on what didn't go well, these supporters, these people who are potentially seeing the picture differently and are looking for the things we're doing well, they offer us a really valuable piece of insight. They won't be necessarily as fixated on the negative. And it's important that we start to get a good way of taking in this feedback so that we can absorb and hold it as a valid data point as well. Often, when women are given good feedback after they think that something has gone badly, they start going, "Oh, they're just being nice," or "They're just being kind to me," and so they almost dismiss the good feedback. And what we're encouraging you to do here is to keep your mind open to go, actually, if they're telling me this went well, if they're saying, the way you landed that point, I saw that, stakeholder X really had an aha moment. Listen to that, because these are the things that you're potentially missing. And so they're drawing out some things that help you balance some of your own tendency potentially to only see the bad or to dismiss the good when others talk about it. I think the third piece that we know is super important is when you're feeling resourced and when you're in a space where you can listen, to actually go and have conversations with people who don't agree with you, people who have that different perspective. Potentially you're in conflict about a particular project or strategy for the organization. And we don't like conflict, so we tend to shy away from it. We don't necessarily want to hear, but sometimes those people are the ones who can expand our viewpoint and get us to see something that's actually useful. Doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they say, but that their perspective, their criticism, their difference of opinion is often worth having a good think about, reflecting on, asking some questions about, because when we do that, we see the world differently. And it means that we're more informed so that when we are in a conversation, we can actually draw on all of these pieces of feedback rather than just relying on our own or the people who support us.
Yeah, I think learning to receive feedback well, and we've talked about this on an earlier video, is really critical. The goal when you're in conversation and having feedback from critics or tougher voices or people with different perspectives is not to judge whether they're right or wrong. In fact, it's really helpful to go in with an open mind and suspend judgment. That's not the goal here. The goal is to understand how they or why they have that perspective, what is going on in their world. And for me, when I was able to really get this and I was able to put the defensiveness aside and the judgment aside, and I was able to step into their shoes to be curious, what is going on in your world that you see the scenario from this perspective, and that's the feedback or the comments that you have. When I was able to do that, it broadened my own perspective. That didn't necessarily mean that I left the conversation agreeing with that person, but it broadened my perspective. And in some cases, I realized there was actually a piece missing for them, that there was something that was in my mind, in my world, that I was aware of, that impacted my perspective that they weren't. And so it really, the learning and the lesson was really around what do I need to do differently to make sure that they have all of the information the way that I see it. And then they're, of course, then entitled to their perspective still. But for me, there was some missing pieces. And so to be able to do this, it does take a little bit of courage, to Fee's point, to be resourced, to be able to meet that conversation, to not be judgmental or defensive, to be curious, and to be kind and respectful. We don't have to agree. That's okay. And the opportunity is, what can I learn from this and from here, so that I can really calibrate, right, and have a balanced perspective of a scenario, which is then very much around where to from here.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we want you to catch here is is drawing on different perspectives so that you can make discerning choices. We're not asking that you blindly accept everything that other people think or that your own brain perhaps beats you up or judges you for. It's important to go here and to actually unpack it so that you can decide, oh, okay, based on all of these different viewpoints, all of the intel, all of the data I now have, I can make a good and constructive choice about what I might do differently in the future, how I'm going to show up, and what I'm going to share. And when we do that, we find that it's very different. The way in which we navigate things, the way in which other people respond to us is really supportive of and helpful because we're talking into the very things we're likely picking up on some of the things that critics would say was important, was acknowledged as part of the discussion. And so I think we want to make sure that we're welcoming in feedback and then processing, then deliberating and discerning on it and making sure that all of these things are part of the whole. The beauty of doing all of this means we stop over relying on any one data source. We're more likely to include all of the pieces that are important, and we're more likely to see opportunities because we've taken the time to actually integrate and think about things differently.
We're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation and you know someone in your network who might benefit, we'd love for you to share it or tag them in one of the comments below. If you'd like to see more of these conversations, including what gets in the way and how to of giving and receiving feedback, be sure to head over to our YouTube channel and look at recent videos and tons of playlists there, including lots of clients sharing their stories about the impact of core confidence and the Acts of Confidence program as well. And if and when you're ready to go deeper with your relationship with core confidence, visit our website, coreconfidence.com.au.